Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of WOWSA Live with our host, Ned Denison. Ned?
Hello, everyone. I'm an epic marathon swimmer, and I'm also the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Our guest today is an honoree of that organization. So I'm going to start by asking James Pittar to give us a description of his marathon swimming career.
Thanks, Ned. Hello, it's James Pittar from Sydney, Australia. I'll give you an outline of my marathon swimming career. First major swim in Australia was the Perth to Rottnest Island swim, which is about 19 or 20 Ks. And then my first overseas big swim was to swim the English Channel from England to France in 1998. Since then, I've completed swims, the Manhattan Island Marathon swim. I did the Perth to Rottnest Island 6 years in a row, which was a bit madness, but I kept on going back. And in the year 2000, I did a swim from Martha's Vineyard to Nantucket Island with an American lady, which was a lot of fun. And that we're the only two to have done it. A few have tried it since. It's about 26 kilometres off the east coast of America there. And then 2002, I swam the Strait of Gibraltar, and I was the first Australian to do so. And then 2003, I did a swim from Borgihira, Italy to Monaco as part of the World Sport for Good Foundation and World Sports Awards. And then at the end of 2003, I decided to do something unusual. I wanted to try and do an open water swim in every continent of the world, but I made sure I said excluding Antarctica, which I was pleased I did. And that really was a lot of fun to try and organise in 6 different continents. And I started with the Cook Strait swim from North to South Island, New Zealand. Then in the same year, I did a swim in the Parana River down in South America and Argentina, which was 60 kilometres. In 2005, did a swim in the Vaal River in Johannesburg in South Africa, and that was in a freshwater river, which was very difficult. And then probably one of the swims I enjoyed the most is the end of 2005, when I swam into Anzac Cove, and for an Australian to get even be allowed to swim to Anzac Cove was an honour, but a thrill to be able to do that. In 2006, I did a swim from Maikar Beach to Patong Beach in Thailand, and that was the Asian one. And that to me was a really good swim for me, because a lot of people to that point I'd only really loved swimming in the cold. And that day it was 28 degrees and swim for 7.5 hours in the middle of the sun in 28 degrees, and to complete it was a great thrill for me to show that I could swim in the heat instead of doing swims in the cold. And then at the end of 2006, I did the Catalina Channel between Catalina Island and mainland America, Los Angeles. And I didn't know at the time, but I was the first Australian to complete the Triple Crown. And for those who don't know, that's the English Channel, the Manhattan Island swim, and the Catalina Island. 2007, my mate gave me some money in Australia to do some swims. So I did a swim, the Pennock Island Challenge in Alaska, which was a lot of fun. I did a swim from Capitola Pier to Santa Cruz, and then I went to Ireland. And Ned would probably know this. It was a swim that was meant to go from Cleggan Pier to Inishbofin, near Galway Bay there. Unfortunately, we had a 40 k now off winds from a cyclone, and we ended up swimming around off the sort of coast, or off the Inishbofin Island. It didn't do what we wanted to do that day, but that's just the way things go. And then in 2009, I found that there's this thing called the Ocean Sevens, and I'd done 4 of the swims at that point in time. So I tried to do the Molokai swim in Hawaii in 2010 and failed. After getting a back injury early in the swim from 9-foot dumpers at the shore. And then thought that to me, having a young child and a young family, I just decided that was the end of it, too much training. And then by chance in 2013, one of the great swims for me was to be invited through a friend I'd met in America in the Alaskan swim, had invited me to be involved in the first ever, or to swim a stage relay swim across the entire length of the Bering Strait without wetsuits, which I thought was madness at the time. And it did get completed with 66 people from 16 different countries, and an absolute honour and thrill to be involved. And I think an even to me an honour as well to get the penultimate swim before high-fiving the Russian into the beach in Cape Wales in Alaska. And then after that, then the next year in 2014, I did a swim that was a great thrill to me. I think my major hero in life is Nelson Mandela. To be able to swim from his temporary residence for a long time, Robben Island, into Blauberg, with 3 or 4 of the guys who'd been involved in the Russian swim the year before, was an absolute thrill. And yeah, it always gives me goosebumps. And to be at the end of that swim, I was embraced by one of the people who'd been with Nelson Mandela for 13 years in Robben Island, was, I think, a thrill. And it was a great day. Since then, I've just continued doing my very small ocean swims each year for my Rainbow Club. The Rainbow Club is an organisation that provides swimming tuition for disabled children. And that's a lot of fun. And we do a swim each year and raise money for that. And I've raised money for people like the Fred Hollows Foundation. So I think for me, I've just been very fortunate in my career to have done swims all around the world in different conditions. But I think the major thing is to meet wonderful people and wonderful human beings that help you out all over the world. And I think open water swimming is a unique group of people. You meet a lot of them all the time around the world, and they know who you are and vice versa. And I think I got to see some wonderful places like Argentina and Turkey and so forth. So yeah, absolutely.
James, when we met in Ireland, my first kind of clear recollection is your kayaker with a whistle. Can you explain to people what's going on with the whistle?
Well, I'm a totally blind person, and that my kayaker uses a whistle system. So we have he blows 1 long blast IV left, 2 short ones IV right. And that's a system we've used for a very long time, really right from the start. We designed that way back in 1998 for the English Channel. We used a loud hailer in the English Channel. And to hear probably, I'd never swim straight, so I swim all over the place. So to hear probably what was English Channel swim, it was 14 hours almost, and I probably heard 3 whistles a minute. So I mean, at the English Channel, for me, my swim's very much a mental approach, because I've got to be listening to whistles and not trying to veer too much, because the more veering you're doing, the more swims you've got to do. And, that sort of, I probably swim 10 or 15% more than anyone else does. So for me, it's a lot of concentration. And also, I think the thing that's probably in all my swims that I have found is that, I go out there and do the swim, but I could never do the swim without my crew. So, I had to take a lot of people away when I did overseas trips, which obviously takes a lot of logistics in organisation, in getting people around the world. And, like the English Channel, I had 4 people there. My coach stood for almost the entire length of the English Channel blowing the loud hailer. And you take crew with you, and you need that assistance all around the places you go to. So it is a lot of logistics to start with. I remember one person said to me one time, "Oh, you just seem to rock up and do the swim." I said, "Yeah, if you could see my email trail on my phone bill, you'd know that wasn't the truth."
So first of all, no one swims straight. All right, you may not be able to see that, James, but let me assure you, no one swims straight. And even looking at the boat in the English Channel, there's a great commonality that people all of a sudden start to swim away from the boat, and all manners of torches at night and throwing stones and yelling and whistling often doesn't work to bring them back. So open water swimming, marathon swimming, is a lonely sport with occasional bits of fear. I can't really imagine doing it without seeing. What are you thinking out there when you're swimming?
Well, for me, sometimes there's an advantage not to see, and the advantage is if you're in the English Channel and you can see the White Cliffs of Dover, where it might be, and you think, yep, and then 5 hours later you still think, I'm still seeing the same thing. Wow, I've gone nowhere. And that can be, for someone who can see, can be disconcerting. I mean, the advantage of Catalina is that I swam in the dark. Well, for the first 6 hours, it didn't matter. It didn't matter to me. I didn't have any fear of that at all. It was probably my kayakers who were with ones having the conniptions. So for me, I think for me, it's the fear that you maybe aren't going to succeed. For me, and I know that when I first said, I'm going to swim the English Channel, I went, a blind person can't swim the English Channel. So I think there was always this thing of, if he fails, it'll be, well, we knew that was going to happen type thing. So I think I've always got that in my mind. I'm not a quick swimmer. So for me, it's always a lot of training is needed. I think I always just put so much trust in my handlers and my whistleblowers and my kayakers and my crew. So I don't really have a fear. I've never had a real fear of sharks either. So I just go out there and swim. I think that's my group's problem, not mine. So I think for me, not being able to see is sometimes good because I just go out there and swim. The poor old group's got to do the rest of the problems. And so I don't have much in that relation. So I just enjoy it. I just love getting out there.
For viewers who might not be familiar with some of the long swims, the cliffs of France look exactly the same 10 miles away as they do 1 mile away. The cliffs in Catalina look exactly the same 10 miles away as they do 1 mile away. So if you're silly enough to look up and plan your hopes on getting closer, you don't get the visual feedback, and it can be quite tough emotionally. James, the one advantage I have to say you probably have is we've talked to several swimmers, swimming into the darkness from the light can be a soul-destroying experience. You know it's going to be dark for endless hours, whereas starting in Catalina in the dark, you know the sun is going to, you know it's going to get lighter at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whatever time it's going to be. You also competed in a number of disabled championships around the world. Talk to us about being with folks who also have a disability and how that's different than the rest of your marathon career.
Oh, it was great. I was lucky enough to be involved in the World Championships and Games for the Disabled in 1990. They were swimming pool events, and it was great to be with people not only who are blind, but also cerebral palsy, wheelchair, amputees. That was a great thing to see people and the way they all performed. And, it was just amazing. I think that really gave me thinking of, wow, this really is impressive, and how that is improved and how that has just increased, and the amount of to what it's like today. I mean, I was lucky enough to go to a place like Thailand and compete in the Thailand National Disabled Championships in the swimming pool in this place called the Lumpang Province, northwest Thailand, and that was great because it showed me again that trip to me was great because I not only saw people with other disabilities from countries, but I got to see, or I got to recognise how lucky my own country, how lucky I am in my country that I have great facilities. I think I went to the British Blind Nationals and then probably the FESBIC Games. And I suppose for those who don't know, the FESBIC Games stands for, I'm not sure whether they still do them anymore, but they did in 1994 and they were in China. And that was a great experience, China. It was, before that, I'd only really swum in front of maybe family and friends in national championships in Australia. And then to go to this Beijing pool where there were like 12,000 people in the stadium playing bongo drums was just, I don't think I reacted particularly well at that situation. It took me 2 or 3 swims really to get used to that situation because I wasn't used to it. But Beijing was great. Far East and Southern Pacific Championships is those countries in the Far East and Southern Pacific. It would be a bit like a Commonwealth Games for the able-bodied in, some of the countries are involved and some aren't. And I think it was fantastic to go to Beijing and to see what that was like and to experience some of the things. So, I mean, I was very, very fortunate and to meet other people from other countries who had disabilities and just to see, it's just a great experience. And I think you really take that out. And now that the Paralympics is such a big event, I think it's something like 4,000 competitors. I might have that statistically wrong, but and all different disabilities and as I said, it's that they do such great events and it's brilliantly organised. And I think to be able to go to actually and to be there when my mates were swimming in Sydney at the Paralympics was magnificent.
And when you were a young child, a teenager, how was the acceptance of your disability in the sporting circles?
I think, well, I suppose I started losing my eyesight when I was 14, 15 years of age through an eye disease known as retinitis pigmentosa, which is an eye disease that sort of does destroy the retina, the back part of the eye, and you eventually go totally blind. And that would have been the mid 80s, and I think the acceptance of people with disabilities, it really didn't get much coverage around the world, really. So I think it was, whereas for my mates at school, they were fine with me. They accepted me for what I was, and went along with it. I was fortunate enough to go to I suppose you call it a public school in England, a private school in Australia, where they really much cater for people with disabilities, and have done so since. And I think I really, so I was accepted by my friends, and I've kept my school friends, 33 years later. I think that's a great show of what it was in those days. But I think that in relation to sport, I think that really the major sports when I first got involved in the blind sports was mainly just swimming and athletics. A lot of the other sports have come on since, and today it's in Australia the swimming and athletics. I'll talk about that as I know that probably the most, is now part of the overall able-bodied Australian athletics and swimming organisations and associations, and today, when I get emails from Australian swimming all the time about who makes the teams for the Olympics, and it's now the Olympics and the Paralympic team. They put all the names of all the Paralympians and the Olympians all together, and I think that's such a big step compared to when I first started.
Let me take you to someplace cold. Describe to people the Bering Strait relay, but I have a kind of unusual question for you. So here's the question.
Yep.
Your time to swim is coming up. You've
Yep.
got your swimming costume on. You've got your hat pulled over your head. You've got a big robe on, and they
Yep.
say, "Okay, James, it's time to get in the small boat." So take us from that moment
Yep.
to being in the small boat to how many other people are out there, to unusual experiences and coming back. Is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? Just help people understand the joy of being out there in that small boat for a little while.
Well, I'll take you right from when you get into in the major boat, or the 100-metre Russian military ship. You're put into the gym area with your 3 other mates you're going to swim with, and you then walk down the sort of internal stairs, and you get onto the pontoon. Now, the pontoon's going up and down with the water, obviously, and with the ocean, and you've got to get from the pontoon into a inflatable rubber boat, or an IRB as we would call it in Australia. And I'm not sure how big they are. I could give you exact dimensions. In this IRB, we had 3 swimmers, well, probably 4 because one came and swam with me because my loudhailer didn't work particularly well. 3 Russians, which was a driver, photographer and observer. And we even had a South African photographer. So we had 8 people in this boat. You've got to get in it. That's right if you can see. But for me, it was getting in and out of that little boat from the main thing was always difficult. We had a lot of Russians helping us into the boat. There was one funny incident when I didn't swim, when the conditions were so bad, they were 5-metre swells, where the Irish lady ran down the steps and jumped off the pontoon and got into the middle of the IRB. I'm pleased I wasn't involved in that night's swim. And then off you go. It's a 7-minute ride out to where you're swimming. Now, what happens is there are always 2 IRBs. One had a group of the 3 swimmers who were swimming at the time. And the way the swim worked is that you would then swim for 10 minutes and then you would high-five the next person to continue the relay. So you had group of 3 swimmers out there with 1 IRB, and they were partway through that, your next IRB would come out with the next 3 swimmers. And the 3rd swimmer in Group A, we'll call it, would high-five the 1st swimmer in Group B. So you've taken off from the boat, main boat, in your IRB, and you've done a 7-minute trip out to where this other group are finishing off their swim. Their last swimmer has high-fived your first swimmer. They've collected their 3 swimmers, and they've done their 7-minute trek back to the main boat. got rid of their swimmers. They've gone in, had a sauna and done different things, showers, whatever, and got their next group ready. So now my group are out there. First swimmer goes off, does 10 minutes, high fives the second person. And then I always went in third. Now, that was always good and bad. It was good because you got 20 minutes to sit there with your gear on. But the bad bit was that when you'd high five the first person next boat again, you then had to clumber or get back on the IRB as quick as you could. And in these IRBs, you had to swim past an ongoing engine and over a bar and then sit down. And then it was a 7-minute ride back to the main boat. So for me, it was always difficult because I was the last swimmer. And of course, you wanted to get on as quickly as you could because you knew your first swimmer had spent 20 minutes sitting there in the cold waiting for the other two to swim. So that was always a very difficult thing. And even trying to find, the hardest thing at one time was to find the person to high five. So my mate had to sort of get me in the position, then do the high five, and then you've high fived him, quick, get on with it, swim back to the boat, let's get on with this. So it was always a very difficult time. The first time I went in, I thought it would be, I put my hand in at the top of the water, it didn't feel too bad, but when I got in the swim, yes, it was cold. It was 5 degrees and it was cold. I'm not going to say anything else because it was. And I luckily didn't go in early on because the conditions weren't too good to start with when it was 3.2 degrees, but 5 was very cold, and it got better as we went closer to America. But I think probably the funniest thing in the whole trip for me would have to be the second time I went out and swam. On the way back to the Russian military ship, my mate Jack Bright, who could speak fluent Russian, and the 3 Russians, we just stopped after a minute coming back to the main boat, and Jack and these 3 Russians having this ding-dong argument in the middle of the, we're bobbing up and down thinking, what are we doing? And I turned to Jack and he said, I said to Jack, what's the problem? He said, well, it's not a problem for you, mate. We're just lost in the fog. And it's like, well, you can't see. It doesn't matter to you. And all I could think about was, my Czech Republican mate, where are you? I just high-fived you 3 or 4 minutes ago. So we did eventually find that Russian main ship 25 minutes later, but I did feel for my Italian mate, my boat, who'd swum first, and he'd spent 20 minutes waiting for us to finish and then spent another 25 minutes bobbing up and down. So you had some funny moments, and it really was a great time. We were out there for 12 days in total, but swimming for 7. We had some interesting moments along the way, but we got there in the end, and I think it really showed what the Russian staff did on that boat was extraordinary. I walked away thinking a lot of us got bruised, but no one broke a bone. And I think considering the times, the conditions, and getting in and out of, off main boats into IRBs and swimming and not hitting things, and no one doing a major injury, I think was incredible to them. I just think it was amazing feat to get everyone out there and get everyone to swim, and and then to do a flag swim at the end, and to get there at the end, and the people in Cape Wales and Alaska must have been thinking, who are these people? What do they do?
You recently published a book.
Yeah.
Tell us why you wrote the book, and as interesting as that perhaps is, did you learn anything in the process of writing the book? Did you learn some things about yourself that maybe surprised you?
I wanted to write the book because I wanted to inspire people. I wanted to tell people about the swims I'd done and the differing swims I'd done, and also to show that it is possible, if you have whether you have a disability or not, or if you have a disability, that you can do anything. You can go out there and achieve anything. You've just got to think about getting out, going around the block, or getting out, making sure you can work out the logistics. Think about your disability, and if you want to swim in this channel, let's think about how you're going to do that. For me, I learned a lot about the book because I did it a lot differently from other people. I did it from every night for 25 minutes. I'd go upstairs, away from everyone, and spend 25 minutes on a dictaphone. I did that for 4 months, all from memory, mostly from memory. And then I would download it onto a computer, and someone overseas would type it and send it back. And that was a bit different way of doing it. And then I spent over a year getting an editor who then had to edit my terrible English and punctuation. She must be still having nightmares on that one. But I was lucky to get an editor who knew nothing about swimming. And that to me was good, because it comes back to your question. it told me a lot about, you can write a book about swimming, but remember, you want not only a swimming community or the Neds or the Steves or whoever to buy it, but you also want people in the public to buy it. And there's no good talking about, a 3-foot neat tide, 12-foot neat tide in the middle of the English Channel, because they'll not understand that. And I think it was great to have an editor who knew nothing about swimming who'd say, well, remember, I'm the Joe Public. I got no idea what you're talking about. And that was great. So I learned a lot in that relation about never assume that people know what you're talking about. Because yes, the IMSHOF do and the swimming public do, but does the general public who might go and pick up that book, or a child who's doing it at school, go, well, yeah, I want to learn something about someone who's blind. So I learned a lot about that. I learned about how long it takes to publish a book. It took me almost 5 years. It taught me about publishing houses and the work you've got to do. In the end, I self-published. So I think I learned a lot in that regard about writing a book. I won't be writing another one. As I said, it almost took 5 years, but my family were incredible patience and time and dedication my wife and daughter gave me to do that. And if anyone would like to buy it, you can go to www.inspiringbookshop.com and you can buy it through that. There's also a Kindle version, there's a PDF version, and you can get it through Amazon as well. But I think I learned a lot, and it was a very difficult thing to write about yourself, I found, and putting the information in there. A lot of it was done from memory. But the great thing about writing a book in this day and age is you've got Mr. Google. So when you might have some statistics that are wrong, the editor just looks it up, puts in the name, puts in the thing, or puts in the, IMSHOF or whatever it might be, and up come all the statistics and all the correct times. So that makes it a lot easier in this day and age. But I enjoyed doing it. I love the process, and I'm just thrilled that I got it out there. And I hope people enjoy reading it.
One last question for you, James. One of the things that is super important in the sport is that fine, everybody enjoys their swims, but it, as you've already described, it takes often an army to keep one swimmer out there. You've often given a lot back to the community. Tell us about some of your favorite charity projects, or the way you're able to touch other people.
I suppose I have two really favourite ones. One is the Fred Hollows Foundation. For those who don't know, Fred Hollows was an eye surgeon in Australia, and his main aim in his life was to make sure that we could have the world to be, for everyone who didn't need, what he tries to avoid people who don't need to be blind, needlessly blind, and that's mainly through they become blind because of getting cataracts. And most of this is in developing nations, places like India, Tibet, Nepal, Singapore, sort of third world countries, Pakistan, Eritrea, Ethiopia. And his aim was to try and, by the year 2020, get that down to, well, almost none. And to be able to, for me, it only takes 25 Australian dollars in which to cure someone's eyesight. And I think I've raised about $100,000 through the swims I've done in Australia and some of them overseas. To think that I've given 4,000 people their eyesight back is just magnificent to me. Obviously, I can't restore mine, but to be able to know that 4,000 people can see again all around the world is magnificent. I've never met any of them, but it's just knowing that you've assisted those people. And I love to just see that and to hear that people have got their eyesight back, and I think that's fantastic. And we did a swim in Sydney one time, and I came out and I just thought, we've raised 25,000 today. I've helped 1,000 people see today, and that was a great thrill. The other charity is the Rainbow Club. The Rainbow Club is in Australia and just in New South Wales, in my state, where we provide one-on-one swimming tuition for disabled children. And it's lovely to be the ambassador. I've been the ambassador since 2001. And it's a great thrill to see these kids who have some of them have pretty severe disabilities like autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome are three major categories. And to see them to be able to just get in and swim, and to be able to have some, give their families some relief as well for half an hour a week is fantastic. This year's been a very difficult year, obviously, because not being able to give these kids these lessons in the last 3 months has been, obviously because of COVID-19, has been a disappointing thing for all of us on the board and the ambassadors, because we want to see these kids have this opportunity. And I said one time that we have these different categories in the Rainbow Club, the 7 colours, and the lowest colour is red. That means you've got a really bad, really severe disability, and some will spend 9 weeks of the term not even getting in the water. And I think to see a red child swam 1 lap of a pool, I said, that is outstanding. I said at the time that was better than me swimming the English Channel, because it meant so much for that child over 10 weeks finally getting into the water, and through the patience of our instructors. But to be involved in it is magnificent, and to see and to have an ocean swim each year that raises money is fantastic. And I love the club, I love the ideals, and I just like that people get an opportunity. The man who founded it back in 1969, who's unfortunately no longer alive, said that in Australia, that swimming is not a privilege, it's a right. And he's exactly right. Every child in Australia, in this great island of Australia, should have the right to know how to swim, whether you have an ability or not.
James, thank you very much for your time today. We
That's fine.
hopefully we'll see you soon and hear your whistle again.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your support.